Hello, this is Sheila Bender, and you are listening to In Conversation, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today we have with us Port Townsend resident Marcia Breece. She was once a globe-trotting corporate executive, and long before that, a stay-at-home mom. She has overcome her wanderlust and finally found her authentic self. Writing became her outlet in the late 1970s when she began journaling. In the 80s, she wrote user manuals for new wireless products, and in the 90s, she wrote articles for technical magazines, but longed to write from her heart. After her children graduated, she worked internationally for several years, helping to establish wireless networks in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and India. Then, as VP of Product Marketing for an international software company, she spent her time traveling the world, including trips to London, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. In 2005, a line from a Mary Oliver poem hit her hard. "Are you breathing just a little and calling it life?" Came from the poem, "Have you ever tried to enter the long black branches?" That's when she jumped off the fast track. She left her corporate career, bought a llama farm in Paulsbo, Washington, and opened a B&B. She served fresh eggs provided by over 20 hens, while her comical ducks and geese ate the slugs in the garden, and 5 entertaining llamas provided fiber that became beautiful rugs. As much as she loved the animals, she did manage to complete a memoir in the winter of 2009. In 2011, she sold the farm and moved to a tiny beach cottage in Port Gamble, Washington, where she wrote her first novel, Secrets Lost. In 2013, she moved to Port Townsend. She's nearly finished another novel, Callous Choice, due out this year, and she lives happily with her Havanese puppies, Dora and Ellie, near Uptown in Port Townsend. Welcome, Marcia.
Well, thank you.
I'm really glad you're here. I have a sense, because I've read some of it, and we'll hear a little bit of it ourselves today, that the novel you're just about done with does take place in India, one of the places that you landed during this crazy whirlwind life of going around the world. Mm-hmm. Of all the places that you were in your corporate jobs and in your peaceful and busy, both peaceful and busy job with the llamas and the B&B, why did you choose India as a setting? Why did that speak to you to write your novel about India?
India speaks to me so loudly. It's a place of contrast, and I love writing about contrast. I'm blonde, I'm tall, and when I go there, I'm definitely a contrast. That was an important feature that I wanted to write about. Not myself, but I mean that contrast.
So, it makes me think about how many writers have written well in exile. And there's something about just being in a culture, a place so different that brings out our story.
I didn't write while I was there. Of course, I was working and didn't have time, but definitely once I got home, it has stayed with me. I was only there the first time 6 months, the second time 3 months, but it was years of my life. It was really important.
I know that we're all going to get to read that soon, and that brings me to the fact that you're not only a writer, but you're, let's call it day job, but I'm sure it's flexible timing. From your website address, www.publishing-partners.com, is the way you're earning your money now that you're not running a B&B and a llama farm. I met you because I needed a book published, self-published, but as we've been chatting before the program, self-publishing does not mean you do everything yourself. That would be very overwhelming for most of us. And so I was lucky enough to meet you and learn that you did the part that I would have no idea about how to do. And I know you've helped a number of writers. So let's talk about that process and what it is your day job consists of.
Okay. Publishing Partners does kind of an a la carte menu of services for our clients. Although I can do most of it myself, I do have people that I call on. If I have a complex design for an interior, I can call on a designer, or a cover. Some of them I can do, and some of them we hire other people to do. It isn't all self, like you said. There's a lot of people involved.
And how did you come to doing this kind of work?
I learned how to do ebooks because of my books, my first memoir. And then I knew there was a better way to do the publishing, so I started studying self-publishing. And I started doing ebooks for myself and for other people. And all of a sudden, it just kind of grew, and I suddenly had a business doing all of it.
So, I like to think that in our lifetimes, no experience is wasted.
Right.
And you had a lot of corporate experience, business experience, and you had software experience. So that came to help you, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because for a writer, two things that you've done that would be terrifying are running a business and using a computer program. We are often, as writers, Luddites, and we use a computer just for what we need. And we're getting more complex, like we do research now on Google. A lot of people that I work with say, I don't really know how to do this or that thing. I just use Word and create my document. Yeah. It's fascinating to me that you know both sides of the issue.
I couldn't do what I do if I hadn't. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have come to this if I hadn't. The software I love learning new programs and playing with software. For somehow.
You don't pull your hair out.
Well, there are times, but for the most part, it's like a puzzle. And I put that puzzle together. I taught myself how to do ebooks.
What's it like working with writers who want to see their book published? They have a reputation, writers do, of being a little fussy.
Interesting you said that. After running a B&B, I think you can do anything. Fussy is irrelevant after you've done that. What I love about it is author enthusiasm. They are so excited about their books, and when they get what I feel like might be unreasonable, I have to stop and think how important this is to them. Some of these people have been working on their books for 10 years. I have an 80-year-old client right now. Her dream has always been to publish her memoir, and it's on her bucket list. And she doesn't understand anything about writing books, and so I get to help her. I love that. That's the reward for me.
So you're coaching her along the path?
Yeah, well, mostly she's handing it over. But because I want to make sure that my recommendations are what she wants. And it's going to be a really wonderful little book.
Are you working from a manuscript she created?
Yes, she created a manuscript. It's an outline of a manuscript, and we're working from there. So, I mean, I'm not an editor, but we'll probably pull in somebody to help her with the editing part of it. And whatever we need.
Well, I'm sure she feels reassured. We think of writing as such a lonely occupation, but to find somebody like you who can help her is a very reassuring
thing. I think it is for her and a lot of my clients. Some of them just want to do it their way.
Yeah.
And I have to step back and say, okay. That's always kind of a battle for me, whether to really push back and say, you're not going to be happy if you do this.
Have you had people not take your advice and then say, oops, I wish I did?
Oh, absolutely.
So then what happens?
Then we do it again. Sometimes, or sometimes we just let it ride. It depends.
I think having published both ways with legacy presses, as now the established presses are called, small independent presses, and recently through my own business name, Writing It Real, I feel happy that I had those other experiences because I didn't know what I was getting into. And because I was under contract to them, there was very little that I could do. Often I had absolutely no say about the cover, actually most of the time, actually all the time. I did have say ultimately over some editorial decisions, but it was a huge learning curve to realize what the production of a book entailed and what the publishing process was. So that when I came to do it myself, I was pretty smart in knowing, I think, that I needed help.
Yeah.
And I was not going to ever learn to do all that stuff. Cover design and book design and uploading in the right format. It's like a lot. And that's why with big presses, a book can take 1.5 years in production. That's after it's finished.
Right.
Yeah. So you beat that schedule by a lot.
Of course, it depends on editing. Editing can take a long time depending on how far along the author is with the book when it comes to me. Yeah, I think that the shortest I've ever done is 2 months. In fact, that's kind of about average, about 2 months.
It's interesting that you say whether the book is done when it comes to you. So the writer probably thinks it is, except maybe the woman you were telling us about.
Well, that one's unique, But they come to me with this manuscript, and then when they see it designed, it's like, oh, I wish I would have done this, and I wish I would have done that. And so then
they start to do that.
And then we start to do that, sure. And that's fine.
I learned an important lesson working with you. I was in a big rush to get a book out because I had a professor at a college who wanted the book to use in a classroom, and I had promised it to her, and I was late updating the book. So when I finally got it to you, I was all excited, and it was in form, and then it was like, oh no, there are typos, there are misspellings, there are things. And you very wisely said it wouldn't cost you that much to have an editor, but then we had to do the design over again.
Yeah.
I am always now going to have an editor first before a designer because it's very hard to find these mistakes in your own writing. I talked with someone recently who was also getting close to 80, was talking about really wanting to put a collection of her poems out, and had the word self-publishing in her mind and felt the burden on her shoulders. So there is that burden of self-publishing. It's like, I have to do this myself. And we can talk about how there are organizations like yours that can help guide people. What do you think is the most helpful thing that you can tell somebody who feels burdened by the word self in publishing?
Well, there's help. The self means that you own the copyright, but self doesn't mean that you did it all yourself. That's the most important thing. You can hire a cover designer and do the rest yourself. And that's why I call mine a la carte, because we'll just do whatever part.
Yeah.
Like we did a poetry book where the daughter did a beautiful job with the cover. That's unusual, but she did.
Happens,
But it happens, yeah. So,
and designers, I'm sure, and the ones you know, are flexible to include, even if the client can't get someone to design the cover, the designer can use the work that, like a photograph or something.
Sure.
Speaking of that, there's so many issues that a person like you understands, such as trim size for the book. And if you have a certain trim size, what does that mean in terms of cover design? And what is the front matter of a book? What has to be there? And how do you get a copyright, for instance, is probably some of your guidance, right? So it's very relieving to know that even if you don't know the steps, there's somebody who can tell you what you need to do.
Sure.
ISBN numbers, barcodes, what do ebooks need? What do print books need? This is all that I've learned. Before I met you, I had another person who was guiding me in the earlier stages. And again, I've learned a lot. Truth is, I still wouldn't want to do it myself. I still want someone to be helping me. I'd like to be the general contractor.
Right.
And hire you. But then you are also you're a sub-general contractor.
I can be. Sometimes
So
I do it all
excellent.
myself, and sometimes I don't.
So when do you write? When you're busy?
Boy,
with
that's a
everything?
good question. It's funny. I have months where there's not as many clients and I write. There are months when seems like I work every weekend. For a client.
Yeah.
But what I like to do is take Friday, Saturday, Sunday just for writing for me. And then I sort of dance with my characters all weekend and they talk to me and I kind of get into this little cocoon of writing life because it's hard for me to jump back and forth. So I have to take some big chunks of time and just write.
How do you make that transition? You reserve the days.
Right.
And then what else do you have to do to prepare yourself to be a writer instead of a book publishing consultant?
As long as I start first thing in the morning and don't answer the phone or look at email and
Don't
certainly
look at
not
email.
Facebook.
So no Facebook, no email.
Yeah, just
so
turn
you're
it
on
all off. And let the characters talk to you. That's what I do. I don't know.
So it takes a certain amount of discipline because there's always that temptation.
Not when I'm writing. I'm not tempted at all.
Even at the beginning of your day. You just know.
No.
Okay.
I get up at 5 and you can't. And sometimes it's 2:00 and I think, what's wrong? And I haven't eaten. I haven't gotten dressed. I'm still sitting there totally hunched over.
So what's wrong is you're hungry.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
and I need to get dressed.
Right. So
fortunately, the 2 little dogs make me go out.
Oh, right.
So that helps.
Right. I was thinking your characters might whisper, Marcia, you need some food or we can't talk to you.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend. In case you just joined us, you are listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life. Sheila is talking with Port Townsend resident Marcia Breece about her writing and her work as a book publishing consultant.
Having talked a little bit about how you do this, continue writing even as you're helping so many authors with their books, would you like to read something from your book?
I'd be honored. I really would. Thank you. I'm going to start with the prologue and then jump to chapter 4 because they kind of go together and I think it'll make sense. The prologue, Mumbai, India, 1994. Like a stealth leopard stalking its prey, Calla slipped through the mansion and into the yard with her sleeping daughter on her hip. Her yellow sari and Devi's red dress glowed as she hurried along the illuminated path to the street. The exotic tropical garden and a tall stone wall protected the property from the palm-lined boulevard ordinarily teeming with cars, scooters, and auto rickshaws. At this hour, only an occasional taxi passed. The intense perfume of passion flower blossoms filled the air. Calla paused. She hoped the fruity floral fragrance would evoke loving memories, and Devi would remember how Calla loved her. She kissed Devi's forehead. The opulent wrought iron gate cried like a hungry kitten when they squeezed through. The barrette at the end of her braid flashed with the last glimmer of light as the black metal winked shut. Calla hurried beyond the wall that had safeguarded Devi from harsh realities of Mumbai. As the fragrant air soured, her husband's voice echoed, "Now I have a baby boy. Get rid of that girl." Calla walked for hours, burying her face in her daughter's soft hair and gulping the musky toddler sweetness. Calla's pace quickened through the rat-infested alley next to the menacing stone wall. She hurried beyond the concealed postern window with worn bamboo basket, where donations could be made inconspicuously. She knew, once inside, no child escaped the orphanage. She moved aimlessly through the dark alleys, passing lavish hotels and putrid slums. As midnight blue replaced the utter blackness of night, she nearly stumbled over a pack of children sleeping like a litter of puppies near a fruit-waller's cart. One of the older children rested her arm over a small child. Another spooned against her back. Calla saw a shining yellow light, the love she sought for her daughter. Her course was suddenly clear. Hunching like a heron in the shadows, Calla unhooked the front closure of her yellow Chloe and offered her breast until milk trickled from the sleeping child's lips. She took the barrette from the end of her own braid and held it firmly in her fist, like she had as a child. She said a prayer to her grandmother. "Amma, please keep Devi safe, for I cannot." Then she fastened the barrette into her daughter's hair. Hugging Devi as close to her naked breast as possible, she knelt to place the toddler on the sidewalk next to the oldest girl. Careful not to wake the other children, Calla gently lifted the sleeping girl's arm and let it lay over her 3-year-old's red dress. With her palms pressed together, she silently blessed the small family of orphans, and then she walked away. Filled with grief beyond tears, scarcely breathing, she forgot to rehook her Chloe, leaving only the palu to cover her round, milk-swollen breasts. The yellow chiffon glowed around her like a flickering flame about to blow out. When she came to the Arabian Sea, she kept walking toward the rim of the world until the unfolding sari floated above her like a full moon's reflection. Now we're going to jump to Chapter 4. This is Shakti in 2016. I remember nothing of life in my father's house. In my dreams, however, my mother carries me in the garden. I cling to her long black braid and toy with the barrette at the end. I smell the passion flowers. I take my first steps in warm green grass. I understand her decision to leave me on the street rather than at the orphanage, which, I have no doubt, would have been my father's directive. I know from experience the orphanage is a dreadful place where dreams melt into despair. For over a year, I lived with a group of street children, like a feral family. I didn't understand Hindi and couldn't tell them my name. I can never know for certain, but I suspect my mother spoke to me in Punjabi, a dialect from the north where she was born. Radhika, old and wise at 8 years old, named me after a goddess her mother had worshipped. I didn't learn my birth name until 22 years later. How do I thank Radhika? Not only for taking care of me, but for saving the barrette I wore in my hair that day, the single clue to my identity.
Wow. What inspired the characters themselves? I can feel India in there, that long walk she takes that night.
Yeah,
it's
it was
full of the scents and sounds. And
when I lived there myself, there was a little girl that I befriended. And, of course, I couldn't adopt her. It didn't even occur to me to adopt her. But some of my friends tried to adopt children, and they weren't available for adoption because they had no one to give them up. And so having watched those children, and it's like so hopeless to see how many there are, and there's so little we can do for them. I wanted to write about that.
And you kind of imagined how a child might end up on the street. This
Oh,
child in
yeah.
particular.
And there are children on this street that end up there, the pack.
But we've already learned from your reading that this little girl survives.
Yes.
And learns more. That's compelling to find out how she did that.
Good. Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm looking at my notes here. Some things that I asked you that we didn't address yet. And one of them is, what are the parts of the process that require the most patience on your part? I didn't quite use that word before. You had an interesting answer.
Patience comes into play. We kind of did talk about it. Revisions. As a consultant, I have to step back and allow those revisions. And as an author, I completely understand those revisions. But it does take patience sometimes when you're all done and you're excited about the design and everything. And then the author goes, but I want to change chapter 5. I need patience for that.
Right. And I know as a writer, sometimes you don't know these things until you see it there looking so formal like a book. You go,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we don't get that opportunity in the old way of publishing with the big publishing companies. There's a point at which, I mean, you see galleys and you can make changes, but there's a point at which you just can't.
Yeah.
And that must be harder when you're hired by the client.
You have to say, okay. Yeah. Well, the only thing is expense starts adding up. Mm-hmm. So I have to remind them I'm happy to do that, but it's going to take more hours. And I hope that that's in your budget.
I think that's where writers get this reputation of being finicky.
It's not just reputation. It's pretty real.
Okay. Anything you'd like to tell people about your process?
I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is printing and distribution. I had a gentleman come to me. He said, I've had 1,000 books printed. Now what do I do? And at that point, there's not much I can do. He's got some pretty expensive end tables. And I've got some distributors I can recommend, but it's way outside of the process that I do. We do print on demand. So the books aren't printed until there's an order. And whether that's an order for 100 books or an order for 1 book, they just aren't printed until there's an order.
I think it's good for people to know that print on demand is not just Amazon.
Oh, gosh, no. If it's done correctly, nobody can tell they're print on demand books. They are available to bookstores to purchase if they're set up properly. Amazon likes to say they do that, but bookstores don't buy books from Amazon.
Because they don't make money.
No, right.
They're not happy.
Yeah, they don't want to support Amazon that takes their business away. And then the other piece of it is marketing. I hire somebody to do marketing. I was a marketer. I know a lot about marketing, but there are some nuances to book marketing that are pretty unique. And there are experts that know how to do that. But that's a real important piece that I recommend to my authors.
So back to the man with 1,000 copies, appears to me that he needs a publicist or a marketer.
Right. Well, first they got to get out there. There's got to be a distributor that mails the books and keeps the account set up with anybody that wants to buy a book. Because even if you can market, if the book isn't available through where the book, Ingram is the biggest distributor around, and if the bookstore can't buy the book from Ingram, then they don't buy it. If you imagine walking into Barnes & Noble and they had an account with every single author, I mean, imagine that you can't do that.
So does Ingram accept any book that someone wants to distribute through them?
I guess I would say yes. Somebody's got to set up that account, though. Somebody that has an account, and an individual that already has 1,000 books can't do that. They've got to go through somebody that can do that for them.
I see.
It's not print on demand.
Oh,
that they
because
can
they're
do.
already printed.
Right. Because they're already printed,
Yeah.
they have to have a distributor.
Right. Well, there's a lot of value to print on demand. Nobody's storing hundreds and thousands of copies.
And killing trees like crazy.
Yeah.
And ending up with a garage full of unsold books.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I once slept in a bed at a writer's house, and under the bed were stacks and stacks
Oh,
of
yeah.
copies of books. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, I don't want that to happen to me.
Right.
And as an author, you get an author discount when you order your own book.
Well, you order your books wholesale. I mean, you order them for the same price or even cheaper than the bookstore does.
So you can still have a manageable amount
Right.
in stock
Right.
in your
Oh,
own
sure.
place and bring them to your readings.
Trunk inventory.
Yes.
I call that trunk inventory.
Oh, that's good. So I find that knowing about all the ins and outs of self-publishing, and I notice here I have a note that says that you help with back cover blurbs. I mean, some people don't even think about that. And so I guess my advice would be, and maybe yours too, is like, if you're going to self-publish, really look at books the ones that are out there, what do they have? What are their components? So that when you're speaking with a person like you, you know the elements of what you're going to be asked to create.
Sure. A lot of times the editor can help you write the blurb because they've read the whole book, they understand what it's about, and usually they understand characters and plot and all that, and they can help you write the blurb.
Which is another talent.
It's a huge, and authors almost never can write their own blurb. It's really hard.
They don't know how to make their book small.
Yeah, I had to get help. I couldn't do it.
But one of the things I think we should distinguish is between the back cover blurb, meaning it's sort of a synopsis or the TV guide version of the book.
Well, it's the marketing spin.
Yeah, but then there are also endorsements for the book, and we sometimes call those blurbs.
In my language, that's a review.
But it can be a very short, pithy kind of why I love this book statement by a person in the field that your book is about, or an author that you admire who you know or didn't know till you asked for the blurb.
Yeah.
That has happened. Those are also very valuable marketing. So there are some things that the writer can put into the process of publishing the book that will help with marketing.
Sure.
It's not the same as marketing, but it's necessary.
Well, and then when you start talking about reviews on the back of the book, then you have to get your book out to people to read. You can't publish it right away if you want those reviews on the back. So you've got to get it out, wait for people to read it, wait for them to review it, and then get those back to you so you can put them on the back cover.
So what you're sending out for them to review is just a document.
Sometimes it might look like the book, but it says review copy only across the cover. Sometimes it says make some kind of note about it's not edited yet, so that we can get them out.
So you can do that in your process.
Oh, sure. In my world, I can.
Right.
In the traditional world, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I can go faster.
Right. Well, I just want to give listeners your website again, or maybe you can tell us your website.
Well,
you know it.
I know it. www.publishing-partners.com.
Marcia, thank you. I'm so glad that you are here as another Port Townsend treasure.
Thank you.
I'll look forward to Callous Choice. And I hope you will put it on your website so we can all find it when it's out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
In Conversation is produced by Sheila Bender and edited by Charlie Fleischman.